other types of webinars or anything. Journeys are an important part of everything we do in this day and age. They're an important part because people relay experience. And I've always said that teachers teach, but the true educators share their experiences. And true educators really share their experiences, and that's where we get most of our learning from because they've made the mistakes. Maybe they've gone through the difficult obstacles, they've gone through the uncertainties, you name it. Now, that's what we all want to work through. So journeys has been important. Now we started off with Mahmoud Mauji, who basically took the journey out of dentistry, which was brilliant. And if you haven't heard his live stream, it's worth listening to. His energy is just immense. And then we continued with the journey of Dr. Riz Syed, an implant surgeon, and then last week it was myself who was talking about my journey in perio as well as developing tubules. But an important part has become practice ownership. I think that journey of practice ownership is becoming really important. So many associates have noticed through this lockdown that they need to somehow take control of their destiny. When you're an associate in practice, your control is largely dependent on who owns that practice, what their ethos is, what kind of leadership they have, and really what they will bring to the table. There's only so much control you have. As a practice owner, at least you have control of that. It's harder work. It's definitely owning your own business is more sweat, more tears, and possibly more blood as well, but it's much more rewarding, it's much more controlling, as you see from today's guest. Share that smile with me when I say that it is like that. I've been a business owner at Dental Tubules, and the key to Dental Tubules was nobody had ever done a business like that before. I didn't have the ability to get that expertise, experience as easily. So it was really cool. But that's the job of an entrepreneur, charting new territory, looking for new ways out, and trying to find solutions. That's where growth happens. So if any of you are really, really thinking of that journey into practice ownership, I tell you what, you will love it because you'll get ready for the ride of your life. You'll power off your V6 engine and you will become part of a powerful growth engine. That's what we'll talk about today. But the most important thing, let's go with this. Let's ask you three questions. Question one, are you inspired by dentistry? Are you feeling lost, demotivated, or frustrated or unhappy? Because genuinely, if dentistry truly inspires you, if you're looking for inspiration in dentistry, you've just landed at the right page at dentaltubules.com. Question two, are you looking for genuine, truly empowered growth that's going to power you up, that's going to develop and improve you in your career as a dental professional? Then you've landed at the right space. And if you're looking for a way to empower you, then yes, Dental Tubules is your right place. And question three, do you want to maximize your potential to thrive rather than just survive and fight the day? Then I'll tell you what, you have found the right organization because we believe in inspiring you, in helping you grow beyond just CPD and really thriving to maximize your potential because we believe every single person in the profession has the ability to go beyond what they think they're capable of. We provide more than just education. We are really an organization of tubulites who come together, inspire, grow, thrive together. So come in, explore your growth engine. And I welcome all the people who are new today, who've signed up for the first time. And of course, I always welcome our family of tubulites. It's awesome to see you. I hope you can hear me clearly. If you can, please type yes below because that enables and makes sure that I can be able to connect with all of you. Tell me who you are, where you come from, what are you looking to gain out of today's live stream, because that is all useful for us. I normally start with a countdown clock, but today we're going to speed it up because I know everyone wants to know more about the growth engine and how they can develop practices. Now, growth is about improvement. It's about developing. It's about getting better every single day. It's about pushing your barriers. It's about stepping out of that comfort zone. And the more you do it, the more you find yourself in positions where you love what you're doing. And there are 5 items needed for growth. You first need to know where you're growing into, some sort of a target, some sort of a direction, because that is important. It helps you build your focus, it helps you build your goals, it helps you build your target. Elaine Mo says, all good in the hood. Thank you, Elaine. Good to hear from you. Second thing you need for growth is knowledge. You really need to assimilate and really spend time, committed time gaining that knowledge. The third thing you need is skills. And the fourth thing is the right environment, the right work conditions where you can enable and do things you need to. But in case things don't work out, and if you fail, you can take that feedback and have the support in that environment to enable you to grow. And the last thing you need is the right community, the right group of people. And this is becoming more and more and more important, because if you associate and connect with the not right group of people, it can influence you in ways that you never know. And at Tubules, we try and give you all of these 5 items in every possible way. The right direction with an IPDP. You can actually build your goals, your target. It takes you less than 3 minutes to prepare. We've made it that easy. It's a PDP for dummies, I'd like to say, because I had to devise it and I needed something simple. We have over 50,000 minutes of learning and knowledge on the website. There is no excuse. You can go in and find any topic and gain that knowledge. You need to if you want to move forward. We run courses, we collaborate with courses, we have our conference, we believe in developing your skills with the hands-on courses and congress. We have practice membership for practice teams. There are about 400 practices now using Tubules, and a practice owners club as well. A really vibrant group on WhatsApp, or groups now, I'd say, because we have 2 big ones. But they help these leaders develop the right environments. We work and develop the right ethos in practices. And then obviously our community, our study clubs and groups are absolutely strong. There are a community of over 45,000 members worldwide on Tubules, with 50 plus study clubs in the UK alone. It's a really good place to be, because you need that. Community and connection is just very strong. It influences you massively. So be careful and be sensible about the community you interact with. But when you grow like this, we would hope that we inspire you and we help you grow in 3 areas. We don't just do professional and vocational growth. We also enable to give you personal growth, and we give you the knowledge and skills to enable you to grow financially. Because when you do all of that, you have an all-round development: financial, mental, spiritual, physical, social, familial, everything comes together. That's how you get a happy life. That's what we believe in Tubules, not just continuing professional development and CPD. For us, CPD is the complete person development. That's what it's about, bringing people together to develop as people. I'd like to say dentaltubules.com is a people development company. That's what I like to say. And if we can enable you to thrive, that drives us. That's why we like to say we like to inspire, grow, thrive together. And this only can happen when we all work together. That's the ethos of these Tubules Lives we've put together on Mondays. It's about inspiring at the start of the week. And every month has had a theme. July had a theme. The theme in August was all about the journeys, of which today is the last one. And the theme in September is about conversations, the communication we have at all aspects of the practice and patient journey. And in November, we're talking about orthodontics. October, marketing. December, we'll give you some core CPD recommended topics, because your submissions will be due. January is all about personal development. In fact, I have found a really world famous author on the science of positivity who has just confirmed this afternoon that she's going to do a webinar for us on the science of positivity as part of your personal development in January. There's more coming. And every month we will have themes for this. That's our aim, to enable you brilliantly. So many people asked us about the journey of owning a practice. So many associates, so many young people, so many others. And so we decided to talk and invite 2 absolutely passionate people. Now, Mihir Shah basically has been in and listening to all the Tubules lockdown live streams that we put up. and his input was brilliant. He used to have conversations with me on the background while these are going on, and I could see there was a pure passion, a spark, especially on the dental business and ownership side. Nick Setti, if you've not met Nick yet, then I don't know where you've been, because these famous caps should have been part of your ethos. The Geek Out gang pretty much blew away the entire dental community, at the tubules side anyway, during lockdown. They put 15 amazing clinical live streams together, so it was brilliant to see that. But the big thing about this was that Nick then says to me, Drew, I'm in the process of buying two practices and working through that. This is a guy who's been through the associate to developing and building an amazing clinical portfolio. He teaches, and now he's moving into that growth journey where he wants to become the leader of a practice. He's going to enable others. It's absolutely positive. One last thing just to put there: CPD is available to premium and practice members. Base members, if you sign up for free, you can watch this live, but no CPD. Today, this is another page, but you'll see this page like this, an example. You'll see a video here. Under the video, you can see the comments, and please feel free to put your comments in, as everyone has done, and you'll see CPD questions appear just below that later on. Those CPD questions do not turn up yet. Now, when you're doing your CPD, it'll be multiple choice questions. Make sure you answer all the questions, but make sure after that you type in your reflections. It is extremely important. After reflections, tick the goals for those who created their PDP so that today's session meets your goals, the GDC high level outcome, and then all the feedback and survey questions. There are normally about 5 feedback and survey questions that you will see across there. And when you've done that, it'll confirm the CPD has been added. Go to your IPDP, CPD certificates. You can download your CPD across there. If you're not premium members and you're just base members, when you do scroll all the way down, instead of the questions, you will see the ability to upgrade to premium membership. You actually get a 14-day trial. You put in your card details, but we do not charge you. Explore our website. Just see what an amazing resource this is. Students, nurses, hygienists, therapists, you have a special rate you can apply for. Dentists, you can even pay quarterly. We know times have been hard through COVID, so we've introduced quarterly payment. So all of that enables you to meet your GDC enhanced CPD guideline points while we're doing tonight's live stream. And on that basis, my ramble is over as a host. I want to introduce the two guests today. Welcome to today's show, Mihir Shah and Nick Setti. Mihir, start with you. How are you today?
Very well, Drew. Thank you very much for the invitation for this evening's talk. It's a real privilege and honor to share the stage with you, Nick. Respect you a lot in terms of your clinical dentistry and your teaching, and yourself, Drew, as well, who's created such a fantastic platform for all dental professionals. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, you're most welcome. And when I actually think of your journey, Mihir, very briefly, you graduated in 2013 from Leeds University. You come down to Kent, you do foundation training, you connected in the practice and stayed on for 3 years from 2013 to 16. And then from 2016, you moved to private practice. And it'll be interesting to hear what drove that change. But you worked with Dr. Behzad Manzoor, and Behzad was doing his implant MSc with me. If he's listening to this, Behzad, absolute legend. What a mentor to work with. And then from there, you've gone on and taken the leap into practice ownership. I mean, you must be mad.
I think a lot of people will say that. I think that a lot. And I think if you ask my family, they'll probably say I'm a bit crazy to do so. But like anyone, we have our reasons for making certain decisions and taking the plunge, and, this evening I'll share some of my reasons as to why I made that plunge, definitely.
I'm looking forward to this because there's lots of people who want to learn about this. Nick, welcome this evening as well. It's been like years since you've been on Tubules Live, but it was only a few weeks ago, wasn't it?
You had a haircut and everything, mate. What's going on? It's a
I had
pleasure.
some masks. I needed some masks. The masks go here, but they told me to cut my hair as well. There must be something going on there. Hey?
No,
I mean, you've shown us, and you've given us insights, and you've given us knowledge on your clinical talent, your all the things you've done with the FIPO concept, which I loved, by the way. You've spoken about composites through lockdown, and now you show another feather in your head about owning practices. You're in the process of doing this.
Well, I actually, and thank you, Mihir, for being so kind. But I actually feel a bit of a fraud being on the stage with you because, as I said, my buy-in for Square Mile hasn't gone through yet. We're close to the process. I'm doing a lot of the stuff in the practice for that. But Mihir, for understanding what you've done and changed at your practice over the last 2 years and how young you are as well, 4 years younger than me. So the fact that you've done that in a much shorter time period than me, massive respect to you for doing that. And I'm looking forward to hearing your part of the talk. And so my part of today is talking about my journey that's led me to this point where I feel that I need to do something different and take charge of a practice. But I'm very much also looking forward to hearing Mihir about, as a young dentist, how he's taken his practice and what he's done. So it's a pleasure to share the stage. And Drew, as always, nothing but huge respect to you. You've always been such an inspiration on my career. And I really missed you, mate. I'm so used to talking to you every day. It feels like I'm planning what we're doing next. So it's not been nice. I'm currently in Greece having a holiday. That's what I've had to do to keep myself occupied because I don't get to speak to you so much anymore.
I thought I'd give you a break from the madness, but we will be back to it. Well, I think it's up to you to now decide who's going first, and we are looking forward to hearing your journeys of practice ownership and the tips that you can share with us. I'm going to disappear away, and the floor is over to Nick Setti and Mihir Shah for this evening. Thank you, guys.
Perfect. Well, I think I will go first, and the real good tips are going to come from me here afterwards. But no, it's a pleasure to be on. As always, I've loved talking to the Tubios community, and it's a pleasure that Drew's invited us back on. And really, I'm going to just share my screen. And I'm going to start off by saying that before you think about buying a practice, really master the art of being an associate. And I'm 10, coming on 11 years qualified now, and I've still got a hell of a lot to learn, but I've learned a lot along the way. And I've also realized in the last couple of years, I could have done a lot more, a lot different. And I've made a lot of mistakes along that way. And hopefully I can share some of those mistakes with you and see how you can do like what Mir has done and shave a few years off to get to your end goal. So briefly, and this is not to big up myself, is to actually show you that I've done all this dental education, which is great, but not much to do with business on this list here. I qualified from King's. I did a master's in aesthetics. I've been part of the British Academy of Aesthetic Dentistry for many years, and I help organise the events, and proudly part of Tubules. And we had so much fun doing the Geeking Out in Lockdown, which we had over 8,000 people watch our lectures, which I was really proud of, actually. And Drew said it right, that true educators and true inspiring people that inspire, they love to teach and give their knowledge. And that's really what me, Riaz, Elaine, Sanjay, Drew, we thoroughly enjoyed that process. And actually, even though the idea of owning a practice is quite scary, I think in a weird way, I've never seen a time where dentists have been so open with each other through the aftermath of COVID about how they're recovering through their business. Everyone's sharing their information. I've never seen a time where no one's leaving anything, any secrets. Drew's put on some phenomenal talks with various practice owners. Everyone's helped me with our standard operating procedures. I've had so much help from other dentists, and it's really actually a good time to take that plunge because everyone's in a giving mood. Um, but back to what I was saying, all I focused on for the first 10 years of my career was dentistry. I did every restorative course going. I loved Tiddu Manku's course, Basil Mizrahi's course, and last year I did Mauro Fradiani's in Italy, spending roughly about 10 to 12 grand a year, for which my wife wasn't very happy for me for doing that. But nevertheless, I was just obsessed with it. I was inspired to be like the Tiddu, Basil, Mauro, and even my brother, especially Sanjay, who's been a phenomenal influence on my career. We started doing courses many years ago, but we formally started doing a training academy last year. And I do a lot of lecturing, nationally and internationally. And I'm very lucky to be surrounded by some fantastic clinicians to help me along the way. But really, my pitfalls were the fact that I just never took any time to invest in learning business. And yeah, it's great. I learned how to do nice work. So I learned how to do really nice zirconia crowns. I learned how to do full mouth rehabs on patients using a mixture of composites and ceramics, and all of that stuff's great. And I'm really proud of what I've learned. And I'm also just feel like I'm a drop in the ocean of where I need to be, especially clinically. I'm surrounded by so many wonderful people that I'm always feeling inspired. But it didn't always start like that. You know, I didn't just come into dentistry and just have it all figured out. And I went through what everyone goes through. I started off in a really busy NHS practice owned by one of the biggest corporates in the country. And it was hard. My first 4 years, I found it tough. And the truth is, when we go through our journey, we have challenges. We've got personal challenges. We're managing patient expectations with not really much guidance. At university, you've got your demonstrators, but when you're out in the real world, it's all on you. You've got to have a busy NHS list. I was seeing 20, 30 patients a day, but I was also trying to increase my private treatment uptake. And I've always believed that whether you're an NHS dentist or a private dentist, your patients really deserve the same amount of respect and care. But with the private treatment that we want to provide with aesthetic procedures and adhesive procedures, the protocols take a lot longer. Complex treatment planning of wear cases, they take a lot longer. So you need to have a completely different mindset for providing high-end private treatment, not just from an aesthetic point of view, but a functional point of view. So to try and do that in the midst of seeing 20, 30 patients a day, I really struggled. I remember going on courses of people that I looked up to, Gov and Andrew Chandrapal being one of them. And I'd go on a course and watch them on a Friday, Saturday, and I'd go back on Monday, and it wasn't easy to apply those techniques because they're talking about cases where they'd spend an hour, 2 hours, and I've got, 25 minutes. And it's funny because now I teach and I do the same thing. And it's quite easy to forget that we all went through this time precious environment. And the biggest thing is developing confidence in myself and my ability. And no, I was always being humbled on a daily basis by my brother. For want of a better word, he used to kick my ass. I'd have to show him photos of every before and after case pretty much every day. And I didn't appreciate it at the time, but actually it was one of the things that really put me on the right track. But this is really important, not just for your clinical abilities, but also for taking the plunge to own a practice. Having confidence in yourself and being committed to learning the journey is incredible. But what's really kept me inspired over the years, as I've mentioned, is being part of an academy, such as the British Academy of Aesthetic Dentistry, being part of dentinal tubules. I mean, what Drew has done over the last 10 years, really, you didn't need me at this talk. You should have just let Drew carry on. I mean, he did a superb talk on inspiration, and it blew me away. It made me really rethink. And I love what you said, Drew, when you said, don't just be motivated and driven, be inspired. Inspiration drives motivation, and don't compare yourself to anyone. And I'll never forget that. So thank you for that lovely advice. Developing close relationships with the trade has been one of the biggest platforms for me, not just to be able to provide education, but also help me with new materials in a practice. If I want to try something, I know that Optident, Henry Schein, Corsa, I know they'll send me some stuff. They've been so supportive. So, you know, really spend time developing relationships with the trade, especially for anyone that's very young watching this lecture. It's great being friends with dentists, but I'm not going to give you any free composite. You know, make friends with people that are going to really help you along to try new materials. I'm very thankful to have always had people around me that have been incredible mentors, most notably my brother. But what I would start off saying is, especially as an associate, if you're mastering your journey as an associate, dentistry can be a very me profession. Like I've just said, I went on this course, I did Mauro Fradiani's, and yeah, that's great. And I can do some nice work, but it doesn't mean anything because our profession can be quite isolated. You've got to also motivate the team around you. So for example, my nurse, I remember watching Didier Dietschy at the BARD conference in 2011 and just saying to one of my mentors, Shane Gordon, saying, I love what he does. He was showing videos of his nurse doing the shade taking, and the nurse was even putting the rubber dam on. It was incredible. And I said to Shane, I said, my nurse would never do that. You know, she's just not interested. And he said, what are you doing to make the team around you feel special and feel integrated into what you're doing? I said, look, I'm quite fun to be around. I have a good laugh with them. We have a good joke. He said, no, that's you letting off steam in between your patients. But what are you actually doing to involve them in that patient journey? Yeah, you expect your receptionist to talk about whitening. You expect them to know about procedures. But what are you doing to give them that gratitude and that praise? And I realized actually, I'm not doing anything. So from then on, I made sure whatever course I went on, whatever photos I took of the lecture slides, I would spend time with my nurse. We'd go for lunch and I'd go through. I remember Basil Mizrahi taught me how to make nice temporary crowns, and he'd shown photos of old crowns with really inflamed gingivae, and then he's showing us how to make beautiful acrylic temporaries, and 3 months later looking at the health of the gums. I showed this to my nurse and she was really impressed by what Basil was able to do. But when we started doing that at our practice and she started seeing we were getting the same results, she was just as invested as me. And what I love is when she goes home and talks to her other half, she says, oh, we did this crown today. We did this smile makeover today. And I thought, that's it. That's what it's all about. Because Nick Sethi on his own, I can't do shit. I sit on my chair and I play with toys. Everything else around me is done by my reception team, the practice manager, and my nurse. So not just as an associate, but if you're ready to take that plunge, being able to bring your team into it, like your receptionist, if they've recommended one of their friends to come and have whitening done, get them to come up and see the before result and show them the after. Involve them in the things that you're proud of. And I'm telling you, that's been the biggest practice builder for me in achieving a great team environment. And we don't always have it perfect, but it's been a big change for us since we've done that. So this was me improving over the first 5 years, and over 5 years, I transitioned to go completely private. And I knew that whilst I was happy to learn my skills and my trade doing NHS dentistry, I knew my heart lay in providing that bespoke customer experience. I wanted to make someone feel special. I wanted to be able to provide life-changing dentistry. I know it sounds like a cliche, but I really do feel that when you take someone that comes in and when they laugh or smile and they have their hand over their mouth, for me, it's heartbreaking. So to be able to educate them on oral hygiene and get them to a point, not just you, but your team of hygienists, your reception nurses, for me, that is life-changing. And yes, I was clinically improving all the time, but then my next problem was building a business, because I was the young private dentist at Square Mile Dental Center. No one wanted to see me. My brother's 14 years older than me and he is incredible. Who wants to see, the wannabe when you can see the main man? So to actually build a list wasn't easy. And I had to think to myself, what type of dentist did I want to be? Did I expect patients just to be given to me? And some of this I say, and it wasn't necessarily relevant to me at my brother's practice, but certainly at another private practice I worked at. Did I just expect to be sitting there on my percentage of 40, 50% and see patients and then say, bye everyone, see you tomorrow, thanks very much? And actually, I remember working at another private practice and thinking, oh, do you know what? The principal must be cleaning up here. I should just buy a practice. It'd be great. Yeah. Am I just paying for his yacht and his nice Rolls Royce? And believe me, I've seen my brother's accounts. It's not the case. And so I remember talking to Corey Ferran, and if any of you get a chance on Tubules to watch his fee setting lecture, I really encourage you to do so, because Corey made me really, he knocked me down a few pegs when I needed to be knocked down, and actually made me realize that one associate on our own, just doing dentistry, we're not that profitable to a practice. After I get paid my share, my principal's got to pay nursing wages, utility costs, materials, advertising costs. Mihir's going to tell you 1,000 other costs that fly out every month. But what happens if a patient cancelled? Yeah, okay, fine. I don't get any money, but Mihir's still got bills to pay. He's still got to pay the nurse. He's still got to pay the gas and electric. He's still getting money flying out. And we looked at our practice, and roughly for every pound our private associate will make, the profit's only around 15 to 20p. Sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less. That's not a huge amount. That's not to say that I don't value myself as an associate and I don't value our other associates. I'm just trying to say for people out there that have the mentality that owning a practice is easy, it's really not. Sorry, I've just had room service arrive at my hotel at Greece, so we'll carry on. But You might hear a waiter delivering some pasta. The principal would be much more profitable if they just did the work themselves. And I realized that actually, from a financial standpoint, I wasn't necessarily as valuable as I first thought. So then Corey said to me, and on my brother as well, like, do you add value to your practice? Do I do anything to really help bring patients in myself? Or do I expect them to just sit on my lap or come in on my lap, whatever the right term is? Do I cross refer? Am I taking patients where maybe if I can't do the work, am I really elevating my dentists around me? Am I doing well to make sure Elaine's busy, Amit's busy, and Sanjay's busy? And if I finish early, do I stay behind to help out? Even the non-clinical team, does reception need a hand with anything? Can I help my practice manager? And I realized very early on, again, I'm biased and I was very lucky to work at my brother's practice, so I treated it as my own from day one. But to any associate out there, young associate, my advice would be being loyal, being driven to create your own referral list. Make sure when a patient's really happy with your work and they say, oh, I love my work, make sure you say to them, well, the best way you can thank me is by telling your family and friends about the work that we do here. Not just me, but the practice. We'd love it if you sent your family and friends in. That was vital. Planting the seeds for patients rather than just trying to get as many short composites or quick whitenings as I could. I realized if I was going to build myself in London, I had to treatment plan properly. I had to understand every modality from periodontal disease to orthodontics, and I needed to be confident enough to treatment plan that patient. Whether they could afford that treatment yet or not was irrelevant, because if I could show them what I could achieve by showing them other cases I've done, I know that they're never going to get that level of care and communication. Well, not never, unlikely that they're going to get that level of attention when they go anywhere else. And believe me, if you spend time educating your patients and talking to them about what is available in dentistry, they might not go ahead then, but they will come back. If you plant the seed, they will grow. And Basil said something I'll never forget. We want to be able to do more quality dentistry on less patients rather than be a factory and churning out as much dentistry as we can. And this is something that I'm a bit, I say old school, but I'm not great with social media. But I've been so lucky and blessed to, through Dentinal Tubules and other academies, to come across incredible people like Elaine Moe and Amit Patel who work at our practice. And these guys are the epitome of what it means to go above and beyond. You know, Elaine's and Amit, they're both fantastic on social media. You know, Elaine's helping Invisalign, helping us to set up Invisalign open evenings, and they're doing it all off their own back. I've not said to them, oh, guys, you know, help us out here. They come to me and say, oh, I think we should do this. I think we should do this opening. It'll be brilliant. And I make sure, and I'm still an associate at the moment, and I always have done, I make sure I work hard to complement the standard of the other colleagues in my practice. Not just say, oh, you could do with an implant, I'll book you in with Sanjay. I will talk to them about what an implant is. I will talk to them about the surgery, the discomfort of the grafting, but what you can gain at the end of it. So by the time they see Sanjay and I've built him up, it's a done deal. Sanjay's literally got a treatment plan, and the patient's already thinking this guy's amazing because Nick said he is. And I do the same for Elaine when I talk about Invisalign, and the same for Amit when I talk about more cosmetic cases. So please, please, for any associates out there, don't see yourself as a one-man band. Integrate yourself as much as you can to your team, because it is the first step of understanding leadership, and it's the first step, I think, of becoming a good principal. And you know, it's a new world out there, well, for me anyway. But you know, things being done over Zoom, Instagram, I love this. Elaine will post a case, she'll hashtag our practice, and she works at another fabulous practice owned by good friends of ours, and she's always bigging them up. And for me, imagine I'm about to buy into Square Mile. One of the frustrations when I was younger is my principal perhaps wouldn't buy me a material that I wanted. If I wanted to try a new composite, my boss may say, oh, the numbers don't add up. You've got this, just use that. When Elaine's going above and beyond, and how I did for my brother, if Elaine's going to ask for something within reason, I'm never going to say no. I'm not even going to ask for the price of it. I'll say, yep, go for it, get it. If you treat your practice like your own, you will get rewarded. And if you don't get rewarded, that's when it's time to move on. And I'll be interested to hear Mihir's thoughts as a practice owner on that. So my dental advice to me going back would be create a portfolio, take photos of everything you do so you can get critique, so you can show patients what you do to help your treatment uptake, and also to help you get a job at your dream practice. You know, we've turned down specialist restorative dentists in favor of Amit and Elaine because Amit and Elaine showed us what they did. And as simple as that, show me what you can do. And if I like your personality, brilliant. Find a practice that suits your goals. If you want to be a super NHS dentist doing fantastic safe dentistry for the masses, go for it. If you want to be a private dentist that really wants to learn complex cases and do aesthetic cases, go for it. But you must make sure you're part of a practice that follows your goals. You do not want a mismatch. Don't take your principal for granted. Go above and beyond to wow your team, and they will treasure you. My brother's team treasured me. My last practice in Rochford, Oak Dental, I still treasure them. They were wonderful to me because I loved them. Now, I'm not great at this, but you know, developing a social media presence is so important for your practice. Staying motivated via being part of academies and being inspired by others around you. Like Drew says, you know, inspiration should be your drive. Don't compare yourself to others. Learn from everyone. I've got dentists older than me that I admire incredibly, like Robert Retty, who I learned from. And I've got dentists like Elaine, who are a few years younger than me, that I learned from. You know, I'm inspired by everyone around me. This is the biggest thing I can say to you before I come to my final part is while you're an associate, learn. And if you're thinking about one day owning your practice, spend time to learn all parts of the practice running. Don't just go in, do your job and go. Look into how the CQC policies work. Look at the audits. How are you doing the stock control? How are recalls being managed? Learn about how the front of house are doing customer service. We're too focused on dentistry. We're too focused on clinical. It's time to now be a sponge on everything else, which is what I'm learning and what Mihir is going to share with us as well. And finally, invest in yourself. Get a good pair of loops. If you're working a corporate and they are very financially driven, okay, they should be buying you your materials that you want. But if they don't, listen, we're not paupers. We earn well. Go and buy your dream composite system. Buy your non-stick instruments. Buy your Velo light curing unit. Whatever you want, invest in yourself because that's the only way that you're going to improve. That's what I say when I'm teaching anyone on my courses. And all of that's great. But what about business? Because that's what helped me become a great associate. But what I didn't realize is all of this stuff. When you own your practice, you know, employee costs, premises, general, motor, legal, NHS costs, private costs, lab fees, everything. Then you've got your stock control. I'm just scratching the surface here. I've now got about 10, 15 spreadsheets. I think my prescription and my lenses have got about ×2 worse since I've been looking at all these small figures. But it just blew my mind. And I remember thinking to myself, I can't do this. I don't understand anything of it. And I actually protected myself by saying, oh, I'm not interested in it. That's not really true. We're only interested in things that we don't feel confident at. And as if it wasn't difficult enough, COVID happened. Now we've got to introduce these standard operating procedures. You know, these words like fallow times. What changes did we make? Our screens, our patient journeys, contactless payment, all of the things we do, the practice training, all the new PPE that we have to follow, and also how are we monitoring that it's being maintained? How are we reporting minor incidents? We have had a couple where we do a pre-COVID questionnaire, but a patient slipped through the net and turned up and said he'd recently been tested positive a week before. How did we deal with that? You know, do we panic? Do we all jump around and start screaming? Or do we just know that, okay, we've got protocols in place, we can deal with this. But if you don't spend time training the team and understanding these protocols, it's easy for me to phone up Mihir and say, Mihir, can I borrow your standard operating procedures, mate? Because I don't understand this. And Mihir will say, yeah, of course you can. But unless as a practice owner, you're willing to do the hard work and graft and read through this word for word and know that when something's going to go wrong, unlike an associate, when anything goes wrong, a handpiece goes wrong, they're going to phone you. You know, a patient comes in with a positive test, Nick, what do we do? Mihir, what do we do? You need to realize that going from an associate to a practice owner is a whole different mentality. And you need to have time to invest, not just clinically, but really learning this other side of how to run a team and how to be up to date, which is not my strong point, with all the clinical governance side of things and the the standard operating procedures. So to finish, where I went wrong was I didn't invest anything in learning business until last year. I spent no time learning about a patient journey and creating optimal customer service. I just assumed I'm a good communicator and I'll get away with it. And I had no formal training on social media. I didn't think I didn't think I needed to. And all of my social presence that I do have on Instagram, it's all directed to dentists. And that's great because, people say, oh, Nick, you can do a great composite, but that's not bringing my patients through the door. And now I've got Amit telling me, Nick, what are you doing posting all these retracted cases on the Square Mile Dental Center site? Patients don't want to see retracted cases. They want to see before and afters. I'm thinking, oh man, I've got so much to learn. And the last thing is I never had incentives for my team to help me create reviews or boost treatment uptake. Now, yes, we pay our team well in London, but if they're going to bring you patients through the door, and if your hygiene team is going to upsell treatment, and if your reception is going to get that patient who was umming and ahhing to go ahead, they deserve incentives, either financially or treating them or treating the whole team. We've got to have a way of making our team feel like they are rewarded, because if you don't, you will always feel like you're up against your team. We've got to get rid of this blame culture. So what I've changed, I've just had hip surgery. So I've been off again after COVID. I've been off for another 8 weeks. But what I did was I actually sat with every member of my team for a couple of days, reception and my practice manager. And I learnt their roles. And you know what? I realized how bloody hard being on reception is. I took it for granted. The number of calls they take when a patient walks through the door, putting a patient on hold, greeting them with a smile. Dentists will walk out. My brother will walk out and say, oh, can you make sure this lab work sent off today? It's always juggling plates. Do you have a slick enough system at the front of house? Are your team getting enough support? Do you talk to them enough? Do they need someone else to support them? Do you need to give them a couple of hours in a week to focus on certain things? I decided, and again, I'll be interested to hear Mihir's thoughts, that because I'd never invested in business, I'd started investing in business coaching, using great people like Kevin Rose. There's wonderful people in the industry, Barry Alton, Ashley Latta, lots of people. And, you need to do this because for me, it's a whole new skill. And I've learned so much about leadership, communication, where I can handle situations better. We now invest in our team. I'm doing regular training for them. I can't just assume they're going to take what I say for gospel. They deserve that training. We now incentivize them for reviews. When they bring in new patients every month, if they hit my target, I will give them a little reward. And my team now know where I want Square Mile Dental Center to be in 5 years' time. Not financially, but the type of customer service I want. I want our practice to be like the Intercontinental Hotel. When you walk in, from the minute you go in to the minute you leave, you feel incredible. And that's how I want my practice to feel. I tell the team, look, there's no more blame culture. Things will go wrong. Lab work will go missing. A patient will somehow be double booked. But the important thing is we discuss it. We make a note of it. And there's a great book by Matthew Syed called Black Box Thinking, that we should be more like the aviation industry, where any incident, no matter how big or small, gets documented, and we discuss what could we have done better. Could I, rather than pointing the finger at a nurse or reception, did I have a good enough protocol in place for them to follow? Did I have enough information on the morning huddle for that day? And quite often the answer is, when you look in the mirror, I could have done better for them. And finally, almost anyone in your team has the ability to be a phenomenal team player with the right environment. But if they're really not the right fit, despite everything, we mustn't be afraid to change. It is our business. We want our team to feel valued, but they must be in line with our vision. So I hope that gives a little bit of insight on my journey. There's so much I've got to learn. I'm looking forward to the next part, but thank you from Greece. And Mihir, the floor's all yours, my friend.
Thank you very much, Nick. That was a very insightful and great presentation, really, on your journey. A lot of things that I actually picked up myself as an owner right now, in terms of developing better relationships with trade bodies. I thought that was a great point that you mentioned. the journey in terms of customer service, which you and I spoke about a few days ago. I think that's so important. But I'll start my presentation, and I'm sure there'll be some questions right at the end. So let me load this up. Okay. So I thought I'll give everyone an introduction on myself. So I qualified from the University of Leeds 7 years ago, and I completed foundation training, and I stayed at my foundation training practice for about 3 years. Similar to Nick, my journey was that I was working in a very busy mixed dental practice, a lot of patients, between 15 to 20 patients per day. It was a lovely practice to work in, but I felt that it wasn't the type of environment that I wanted to be in. And luckily, a great opportunity came my way quite early on in my career, and I managed to switch across to a fully private practice. And I was under the influence of a great mentor who I know Drew knows very, very well. And it's over here that I really honed my private skills, and I've got a lot to learn. And believe me, Nick, I know I'm nowhere near as good as your pair of hands, but I learned kind of the more important side of things in terms of how a team should grow and develop, how you should invest in the right people, and ultimately how you should believe in your staff and forge great relationships. And I learned a lot from that practice.
I haven't practiced for about 6 months, mate. So I think everyone's better than my pair of hands at the moment.
Still probably better than mine, though. Still probably better than mine. And then shortly after that, I ended up purchasing my practice, which was towards the back end of 2018. Now, the practice I took over was a very run-down practice. It was only 2 rooms. It was run by an elderly chap who'd kind of really given up and had enough of dentistry. So the only way really with that practice was up, but I knew that it was going to be a long and hard slog, and it still is, to be very, very frank. However, over the last 18 months, 2 years, we've slowly developed the practice, and it's now grown into a 4-surgery practice. And as of September this year, I've now become a foundation training trainer. So we'll have a VT who'll be working in the practice with us. So I'll talk about my major reasons for why I wanted to take over and become a practice owner. So since I was young, I've always wanted to own my own business. And since the first day of dental school and from my work experience, I found that that was more the right kind of avenue and path for me. I ultimately wanted to create my own brand and my identity, and have control over where I take the business. The other major reason for owning a practice was complete clinical freedom, create an environment and organization in which I could look after my patients and provide the type of care and service that I believed in. Ultimately, become a leader and share my own visions and values with my team. Long term, create hopefully financial freedom. But ultimately, I wanted to create a culture within the practice that everyone within the organization would believe in. Oops, sorry. So my practice search actually started probably 2 years before I took over the actual practice itself. So I started it around 2016. I looked through various different agents, and we know there's loads of agents out there. I know, Drew, you've got a great talk by a good friend of mine in Andy next week. So I looked through Frank Taylor's, MediEstate, Lilyhead Practice Sales, Dental Elite, Christie & Co. There's an abundance of agencies out there, and a lot of the agents are very, very helpful. I even looked at considering a private sale purchase. So this involved actually simply writing to different practice owners in my local area to see if anyone wanted to sell their practice. And as I'll go on later on, that's actually how I acquired my practice, by writing to someone. It was just the right time, and we ended up making a deal. But one thing I was very, very set on was having very clearly defined criteria for what I was looking at. So I wanted the type of I knew what type of practice I wanted to buy. I wanted it to be close to home, near Kent, so I live in Bromley at the moment. I wanted to have a little bit of an NHS contract, but not a lot, because I generally believe in more of a private practice model. I wanted the practice to be able to grow and eventually, hopefully, add more surgeries. The potential to add more services. So my practice before I took it over was providing very routine bog standard dentistry. They were just providing simple examinations, normal fillings, crowns, but a lot of the work was being outsourced and there was no kind of growth for cosmetic dentistry at that stage. And then ultimately, I wanted the possibility of owning the building. Now, I know this is a slight controversial topic because it generally depends on how much the building is worth. And I think, Nick, you'll probably understand this a little bit better. If you're paying the rents and rates that you guys are in London, sometimes it's not always possible to own a building. So it all depends on the actual numbers themselves. So I'll talk about the acquisition process that I went through. And really, it's a couple of stages that you go through. So initially, you'll show an interest in a practice. And then if you really like it, you'll then submit an offer. Then the offer will then become accepted if it's the right price to the seller. And then it's all about seeking the right kind of funding from the lenders and the banks. And I know, once again, Nick, that you've obviously gone through this process recently, and it can take some time for these first 3 points to kind of all action out. And different lenders do give you different rates. Once you've agreed your asking price with the actual seller, you'll then create a semi-formal contract with them, which is known as a heads of terms contract. And then it's up to yourself and the seller to then appoint your own respective accountants and solicitors to then conduct the due diligence on the business. I would always recommend to anyone who's looking to purchase a practice to try and stick with dental experts. So these are usually NASDAL accountants. Now, for anyone who's listening on this seminar, NASDAL basically stands for the National Association of Specialist Dental Accountants and Lawyers. And generally, these are the experts. They know about CQC protocols, they know about NHS contracts, they know how dental practices work. And using their advice and expertise is paramount. And ultimately, it can actually save you time and long-term a lot of money through the actual acquisition process. After conducting your due diligence, and there's always a lot of toing and froing from this, you'll then end up going through the CQC registration process. And if the practice does have an NHS contract, this will eventually be transferred in the incumbent buyer's name. And then you'll then take over, and that's when you've actually taken over your practice. There are a few pitfalls to be mindful of during the actual acquisition process. You're always going to have disagreements and negotiations when you're purchasing a practice. The seller has their own way of doing things. You have your own way of doing things. You will clash sometimes on values, and it's important not to be stressed out or deferred in terms of what disagreements you may have, and just try and work through the problems. If you work with experts and you seek advice in the right areas, slowly but surely you will work through these areas. It's also important to be objective through the process and not make emotional decisions. This is really, really important for young dentists who are looking to purchase. You need to understand the numbers and ultimately not overstretch yourself. You don't want to be working incredibly hard after you take over just to pay your bank loan off. And I know that this is particularly a problem in London and the surrounding counties, where the value of practices on some occasions can be quite astronomical. So it's really, really important to look at the figures, speak to your advisors, speak to other peers within the industry if you feel that you want to seek advice, and then make an informed and an objective decision. And that's really, really important. Once you've gone through the entire process, to be frank, the hard work actually then starts. So Nick, you've got a long, hard stretch the next couple of months. And I'll probably say for the next year or so, it's It's a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of late evenings, which you're probably used to. But you know, it can be fun as well, because you're shaping and changing the direction of an organization. And it's actually something which is what you've touched on, which is bigger than you. You're shaping something which is far bigger than you. And I can say that that's quite a rewarding experience. One thing I'll say through this process is that it's very, very, very important to get to know everyone within the practice, get to know your team, and get to know your patients. Spend time developing the conversations, understand what their needs are, understand the way the practice used to work, and slowly but surely place your own stamp on the organization with your new workflows, your new protocols, your new gadgets, and ultimately don't be afraid to change things. Now, in my particular practice, I had certain things that I had to change from day one. You know, I walked in and we didn't have a digital X-ray system, and the practice was using wet films, and I haven't used wet films really since I was at university. And even then, they changed from wet films to digital X-rays. We didn't have a proper IT infrastructure, so there were certain things that I had to do. But I saw that the patients were coming around to the idea of basic technology, and ultimately they found the journey a lot better. I would always say that it's very important to have the right team, and having the right dentist is key. I think you mentioned it very importantly, and you spoke so highly of your associates. And I've always looked at associates as not employees of the practice, or people that work for me. I've always considered associates as my partners. And any decision that I make within the practice, I try to discuss it with them. We have team meetings. We go through how we're going to try and make the process better. I always listen to their opinions. And ultimately, we try and come to a joint consensus to try and drive the practice forward. And I think it's a two-way street. Just as much as you want their input, they also want your input. And an associate wants to feel part of the practice. They want to feel part of actually moving the practice forward. And that could be quite a rewarding experience. And then hopefully, if all these things tick, it creates a culture within your organization. And that's ultimately what you want. You know, when you go to the top businesses in the world, you look at Starbucks, you look at Virgin Atlantic, they have a certain culture within their organization. And that's ultimately what I've tried to create. And I know not all the things are there yet, but step by step, they'll get there. One thing I will say, we've talked a lot about investing in yourself, investing in the right courses to ultimately shape your journey. And it's important to always remain as forward thinking as possible. So just as important as it is to invest in yourself, I'll always say it's important to invest in your business. Invest in the right equipment, invest in the ability to show patients your work, and invest in technology that can effectively aid patient communication. So the use of televisions, SLR cameras, intraoral cameras, and generally provide a good service through using good materials. Spend time, as Nick has touched on customer service and training. We're going to discuss a little bit more about this later. And one thing that I would recommend, particularly if anyone is thinking of becoming a practice owner, is investing in business courses. I'll be frank, this has really helped me over the last few years. I forged a great relationship with a great business mentor who's now become a very close friend of mine. His name is Asif Syed. A lot of people may have heard about him. He runs a series of great communication courses for young dentists, but also he helps a lot of principals help shape and grow their practice. And he's had a massive, profounding impact on my development as a young dentist, but also now as a practice owner. And just being able to discuss little things or problems with him, particularly through this challenging time, has been so helpful. So I can't speak highly enough for him. It's also important to remember that through this process, you will make mistakes. You're going to lose some money. You're not going to get it right every time. And it's important to just accept that, but ultimately learn from that. And that's part of the journey. Now, the biggest thing that's shaped our profession, well, the world really, over the last 6 months has been COVID-19. It's the single biggest challenge I face as a business owner. Basically, having the practice closed for a period of almost 3 months has been very, very difficult. And it's not been a situation where we've experienced something like that before, because practices have always remained open. And during this time, as Nick touched on, as an owner, we've constantly had outflows. So it's important for associates to remember that. The practice has expenses, it has fixed variable costs, which still have to be paid. We still have to pay the lights, we still have to pay the heating, we still have to pay for the computer systems, the software, and all these outgoings haven't changed over this period of time. They've still been running, and we need those basic things to keep the practice running and provide some level of service like we had to over COVID-19. I would say that private practice over this period of time has been particularly hard, been hit hard, comparatively to mainly NHS practices, purely because of the funding that the government guaranteed for NHS practices. But there are some positives that we have to look at through this period. And COVID has provided an opportunity for a lot of practice owners, hopefully with the right mindset. The furlough scheme, which has supported employees' wages, bounce back loans, and CBILS loans, although they are loans, have provided some comfort to practices and have helped cash flow have helped cash flow over this period of time. And the lending that all businesses are receiving right now, with the Bank of England's interest rate being so low at 0.1%, it's never been so low. And some of these loans, from a business point of view, are really, really good. And if anyone is thinking of making some improvements or changes, or is thinking of moving their practice forward and using this opportunity, I would really recommend, if they haven't done so already, to try and capitalize on some of these loans if they're possible. What COVID-19 has created a challenge for is that over this period of time, we are in now a recession. You know, it's all over the news, it's all over social media, and there's a lot of negativity through it. Now, there's a reason I put this slide on, and it's something that my business mentor actually shared with us on another seminar. If we look at this graph, so this graph is of the FTSE 100. So 100 most valuable companies within the UK right now. And it's a graph showing the history of the FTSE 100 of the last 20 years. Now, what you'll see from the graph is, if you look towards the left of your screen, is that around 2000 to 2002, you'll see the graph plummeted quite drastically. Why did that happen? Nick, any thoughts? Do you know what happened around 2000, 2002?
No, it wasn't the housing crisis.
That was the dot-com crisis.
Ah, okay. Oh, yeah.
But what you'll see is, as quickly as it went down, it went back up. And similarly, as you mentioned, Nick, between 2008 to 2009, we had the subprime mortgage housing crisis, where what happened in America with the housing market affected the rest of the world, and it decimated the entire banking industry. And very similarly, you'll see the market crashed, and then very similarly, it went back up. Then in 2016, we had the Brexit vote, the market went back down, and then went back up again. And we're going through something very similar once again with COVID. And this tends to happen, this cycle, every 5 to 7 years. So recession is not uncommon. And yes, it is a problem with COVID-19, but there is opportunity out there, and there is some light at the end of the tunnel. And that's the reason I put this slide up. Apart from recession, as I talked about, we will overcome this. COVID-19 has created a number of issues. It's created staffing problems, with certain members of the team not being able to return to work because they may be shielding, or they may have family circumstances where they've not been able to come back to work. Costs of personal protective equipment has risen tremendously, I think I calculated over the last 2 months, we've probably spent almost 6,500% more during the post-COVID era to what we were pre-COVID. So Nick, all things for you to look forward to, really, mate. Practice outgoings, as I mentioned, over the last 2 to 3 months before we reopened, were still prevalent. And I'll still say very few principals, and it's important for associates to realize this, have been able to withdraw any monies from their business. Some have only been able to take a very, very small salary because the outgoings have still been there. So it is a very difficult and challenging time. And then if there are any followers out there today, you'll probably see that there's this constant debate about fallow times, and that is a consistent problem. Although practices are using air filtration machines and HEPA machines, the evidence base for these is limited. And I think hopefully it's a matter of time before some of these standard operating procedures do change. However, one thing that I'm going to talk about a lot more in detail is that COVID-19 has created a lot of disputes and a lot of fractions between principals and associates. And this is what's leading to the potential this is what's leading to potentially the amount of associates now wanting to be principals. So I'll talk about the current practice market as it is right now. Because of these disputes, a lot of associates are now thinking of purchasing their practice, and they're thinking of purchasing their first practice. They feel that the principal is taking all the money. They feel that ultimately they could do a better job. And they feel that they want to go on their own journey now. And that's what I keep hearing. And I do get a lot of young dentists messaging me saying, you know, is it easy? Is it difficult? Is it something I should be thinking about? I'm sure you do, Nick, as well. One thing that has happened post-COVID is that the demand has been spent up for dental practices. Because similarly to practices, a lot of dental agents were closed over the COVID-19 period during lockdown. And as they've reopened, there has been a lot of demand for people to see practices. And the influx of young associates wanting to purchase practices now has meant that the market is again really picking up. With that though, purchase values are quite similar to what they were pre-COVID-19 from my own assessment. It's very important to note that the availability of good businesses is still in short supply. So there's an abundance of associates, but there's only a limited number of practices. And when there is high demand and short supply, ultimately practice prices, particularly in London and the surrounding counties, will always remain higher. So it's important to make sure that you take your time, be patient, and long-term, the right one will come along. There are a lot of things that you could do to try and potentially purchase your first practice. Speak to your peers. Nick is an absolute great mentor. You know, he's very well connected. Speak to other people within the industry. Speak to the agents. Sign up to all the major dental agents. Sign up to Frank Taylor. Sign up to Dental Elite. Sign up to MediEstate. Sign up to Lilyhead. And as you sign up to these agents, you'll start seeing them sending you emails about practices which have become available. And then when one starts to catch your fancy, book a viewing, go and see it. Even if you're not even thinking about it right now, it's always good to get that experience under your belt. Write letters to practices within your local area. This is literally how I purchased my practice. When I was, you know, I remember two and a half years ago, writing loads and loads of letters to loads of principals around my local area who I thought were near the retirement age or who I thought may want to sell. A lot of them didn't respond. I'll be frank about that. But, you know, some of them said, I'm not interested right now. Some of them said they were. Eventually, one finally took my fancy and the right deal came along and I ended up taking over. And that's what, you know, it can happen as easy as that. I'm not saying it's an easy process, but it can be a situation like that where you can end up finding the right one. And then through this point, you can really spend the time to acquire the right business skills and knowledge. And Nick touched on this brilliantly. Spend your time in the practice. Don't just learn the clinical side of things. Spend time with your practice managers, spend time with your nurses, learn about audits, learn about the CQC, learn about some of the daily runnings of the practice. Try and understand the cost base from your principal. Just speak to them. And I'm sure they'll be more than happy to assist you. And I would really, really recommend trying to start going on some business courses. As I mentioned, my main influence was Asif Saib, but there are other great business coaches out there. Ashley Latta is a great coach. And these people are there to help you and shape your journey ultimately. I'm going to finish off on what it is like to be a practice owner. And it's not Ferraris, it's not private yachts. I wish it was that. It's real hard work, and it's an incredibly difficult role to be in. You have everyone who's at your beck and call. They are always trying to get your attention. They're always trying to make sure that things are running, on time and, promptly. And you're responsible for not just yourself, you're responsible for your entire team. So it's very, very difficult to switch off. It is not a 9 to 5:30 job. I would say to anyone, there are two major ways in which you can acquire a practice. You could either do it yourself, like I did, or alternatively, you could potentially buy into a partnership similar to what Nick has done or is about to do. Nick and I spoke about this briefly yesterday. I think if you are a real clinician and clinical dentistry is your passion, and you said it very, very well, Nick, if you want to be a wet-fingered dentist and not deal a lot with the more administrative side of things, I think a partnership model can work absolutely fantastically. You can bounce ideas off each other. You have the support. There's less risk involved because you have two people involved compared to one person. But if you want to maybe take a slight back seat from the clinical role and ultimately try and improve the customer experience, ultimately try and shape your team and do clinical dentistry, but not to such an extent, then a sole proprietorship model can work for you. For anyone who's thinking that being a practice owner, you're going to be absolutely loaded, that's not the case. I'm almost 2 years into taking over my practice, and I can say that the financial reward as a principal are not what I was earning as an associate, and I'll be totally open and frank about that. It takes time, and I would say it takes up to 3 to 5 years before you truly see a return on your investment in terms of making sure the systems are right, the practice is right, before you truly start to see some true financial gain. And that's basically myself all finished. Thank you very much. I'll just come off this bit.
That was really good, Mir. I really enjoyed that.
That's a really good presentation, guys, of your journey. I know there's a lot you can cover, and in the short time, it's very difficult to cover all of that. Now, Nick, you're in Crete, and I believe you're on paid internet time, so you are soon going to have to disappear.
Just before I do go, though, Drew, in case you thought I wasn't true to the call, I did bring the so the geek out cap is with me. But Mir, before I do go, I just want to say that was a really lovely insight, and I picked up a lot from there. And what you mentioned about the partnership model, I mean, the other practice I'm buying is with a mini group. And for that exact reason, that I feel like I am at a stage where I'm very comfortable with my clinical dentistry, but I feel at the beginning of the ladder when it comes to the financials, what you talk so comfortably about, I'm sitting here mouth open thinking I've got all of this to learn. And so I'm hoping that having a successful partnership model with them at one practice will also help me learn the kind of that side of things to be able to bring to Square Mile, my brother's practice as well. So, and I also really like what you said about this time being difficult, but an opportunity with the banks being what they're doing and all of that. I think you explained it really well. So thanks for that insight. I really enjoyed that.
Nice. It was really well articulated, Mihir. And we'll jump on the Q&A if that's fine, because the people are listening. But if anybody has questions, type them below a little bit. And if you're still around, Nick, as well. He was asking about, someone said, can you talk about what is required to open a practice, as in the beginning stages, both financially, in terms of planning? I think that's a massive variable essay Fahad. But Perhaps you can give us some bits on what was involved for you planning wise. You talked about how you found the practice, Mihir.
Yeah.
Uh, Finance can't be that easy to raise. You need to create the business plans, I suppose.
Yeah. So I think once you've found possibly the right one that you're interested in, um, there is an element of business planning to it. So I remember I saw this practice and I fell in love with it straight away. And uh, I looked at it and I thought this is going to be a project and a half. And you know, at that time, you know, I'm quite young. I didn't have a lot of cash reserves, and you know, I did needed to draft a business plan, and that's exactly what I did. So I'd not really done any of these before. So I sat down and I looked at what my strengths were, where I could take the practice, and I actually sat down with my broker at the time and I said, how are we going to secure this finance? And I had a great broker who really, really helped me through the process. And you know, we tweaked it and we edited it, the plan, and then ultimately we pitched that to a series of banks, and every single bank loved the idea. And through that process, we managed to have 4 or 5 different offers for lending. And you know, eventually, I found the right lender who offered the best rates to me, and you know, went with them. But you know, in some situations, you don't need to do that. Not every single practice acquisition, and that's one thing I would share, requires a business plan. Sometimes you do need to do that, but in some situations you don't need to do that.
I think also putting in place and remembering a business plan is as old as the paper it's written, well, as old as the ink dries, basically. By the time you finish writing your business plan, your business plan might have changed, but the banks like to see it as
Exactly.
part of the planning. I know Munis is also asking about any views on a squat practice setup during these times. Any person to seek advice about squat practice. Munis Andy Acton, I don't know if Andy's still listening, is delivering a webinar on buying and selling dental practices next week, especially in these post-COVID times. He's going to cover a bit about squat practices. And if you're listening, you're going to cover a bit about squat practices. But Mihir, what are your thoughts? I know you bought a running practice, but was it pretty much like a squat?
So for us, our
Yeah.
practice,
After unit.
I'll say our practice of Square Mile. I mean, Sanjay being a phenomenal clinician, um, what I realized is I was following very much in the same path where we never really had a clue about business. And if you ask Sanjay, I'm not saying anything untoward about my brother, he'd say it in front of everyone. If you ask Sanjay what he earned last year, he wouldn't have a clue. He'd just rely on Monica, my sister-in-law, to tell us. You know, he literally just loves doing his implants. He loves doing his dentistry. So for me, getting involved in it in a way, I did feel like it was very much like getting into a brand new surgery because there was a lot to do. There still is a lot to do, but just even how we were managing invoices, even simple things like stock that we were selling to patients, sundries. You know, we didn't have a clue on what we were paying for them. It was very much run on goodwill of Sanjay's skill rather than actually having anything financial to it. And Mia will go into more detail on that. But all I will say, because I've got to jump off in a second, is in terms of the previous question about the costs involved and what you can expect to buy a practice is whatever the asking. It's like when you buy a house, whatever the asking price is, that's one thing. Be prepared for the costs that start when you do buy the practice. So already I know that when we buy Square Mile for whatever we've agreed the price to be, and when we buy the other practice I'm buying, there's about 20, 30 grand that needs to be invested in Square Mile. Despite all the high quality equipment we have, as Mihir mentioned, our IT infrastructure is very poor. There's lots of things that need to be updated, as you'd expect. So the costs don't just end when you buy your practice. Have a lump sum or some form of cash reserve of 30, 40, 50 grand as a rainy day fund that you might need because it does fly out. And it just takes one bad month to really put you under, especially things like lockdown. Mihir said it so well that private practices got a real sting. You know, we didn't get any help, any relief, any grants from the government. And I'm not complaining because the dentists earn well, but it was tough. And we don't know if we would be able to survive another 2, 3 month lockdown if it was to happen. Having that kind of rainy day fund, especially if you're starting a practice in this time, the opportunity is there, but it is risky knowing that as you buy in, if there could be another lockdown, your loans are still going to come out. So just have that in the back of your head. But with that, I'm so sorry, Drew. I have to go. But Mihir, I thoroughly enjoyed that and look forward to. Like I said, I will be chewing your ear off. That was fabulous, and thank you. And Drew, as always, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Nick. Enjoy your hours there as well. And so I'll continue with Mihir as well, and Nick can switch off. I think, Mihir, what are your thoughts? You bought a practice. I presume the practice patients was still flowing through. So there was some income because Nick kind of alluded, you buy a practice, you still need a reserve fund to do things. Squad practice, you're not going to have a lot of that reserve fund, but I guess you're starting things from scratch.
So my personal opinion is I don't feel that I could do a squat practice purely in this climate and the risks associated with it. That is not to deter anyone from doing it. I think it all depends on the right location, and I know that Andy's got a talk next week about this, and he'll be able to share a lot of insight into it. If you have the right location, you've got the right marketing and potentially the right demographic, there is tremendous opportunity there for a squat practice owner. And particularly with goodwill values of practices being what they are, and I would say they're now at pre-COVID levels already because of the flux of associates that want to buy practices. It's not a bad option, but you've got to do your research. You've got to know that you're looking in the right area to potentially start up a squat. And I would speak to other owners potentially who've gone on that journey. I've got some colleagues and friends who've done that. One colleague actually who opened up a squat literally 8 months ago, then COVID happened, and then he feels like he's having to basically reopen his practice again. So it isn't easy, and I think, but it isn't easy, but I think there is opportunity there with what we have with social media now. I think that if you get your campaigns right and ultimately you're willing to put yourself out there and showcase your work, social media is such a powerful tool to allow patients to come in. And potentially that wasn't there so much maybe 5 to 6 years ago. And I think Instagram, to be very frank, has completely changed that.
Yep. And so question is, would you go back and do this again?
100%, because for me, it's the journey that I've been on, and I've learned a lot along the way. Things that I wouldn't do again, things I could do better. I really enjoy being a practice owner. Yes, it's very stressful, it's very demanding, it's 24/7. But I know that I'm building something, that's greater than me. And ultimately, I find a lot of satisfaction and a lot of reward out of that personally. So yes, it's hard work. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, as you mentioned, Drew, but I would.
I think it's that passion about that journey. And today we were discussing this journey from a young practice owner because so many young people have a fear factor, an uncertainty factor, unknown factor, where to go. And you've kind of pretty much said, I'm going to bite this elephant and see how it happens at some level.
That's it. I think everyone has fear of the unknown. That's what I'll say, because you don't know what you don't know. And that can, as Nick, so eloquently touched on, when he was talking about his journey, Nick is a fantastic clinician. And he mentioned that, he's never been interested in the figures or what goes on in the background. And a lot of great clinicians end up becoming like that, and that's not a bad thing. But sometimes taking a back seat from the organization can allow you to see certain things. And if you are interested, sometimes actually working on the business rather than within the business actually pays more dividend. And that's my personal opinion on that.
I think that's an important, absolutely important thing. Smita Putty has Putty, I hope I pronounced his surname right, obviously says, does EBITDA give you an idea of what the practice is worth? How do you decide the price for a practice? Andy, thank you for stepping in. he's kind of given some bits there, and I believe he'll expand on this next week as well, Smita, I hope. But what are your thoughts? How much did you pay attention to EBITDA with the practices you saw, Mihir, and deciding the price? Because invariably it was a negotiation. What factors did you pay a lot of attention to?
So I think EBITDA is very arbitrary, and it depends on practice to practice, and it varies. So what you will see with predominantly NHS practices, and particularly in a post-COVID environment, and I think Andy would agree with me with this, is that NHS practices have guaranteed income. And anything which has guaranteed income ultimately holds a high value, because the banks will look at that very, very favorably. So most NHS practices, and again, this is from my research only, around the Greater London and Southern Counties area, have a EBITDA between around 4.8 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for more of a private-based practice or a fully private practice, the numbers become lower. But then there is more risk associated with that, which a bank will look into. What I will say is that I wouldn't get too drawn upon EBITDA values. I think it's important to look at the potential of the practice, whether you feel that it's worth what it's worth, and ultimately how you feel you can transform the business and shape it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, carry on. You were saying.
And as Nick so eloquently touched on, that once you take over the practice, there are other things that need to be done. There are other costs, and it's important to factor in those costs as well as you take over. One thing COVID-19 has really showcased is that how important reserves are in any business. If it wasn't for the CBILS loans and the bounce back loans that the government has supported, I think a lot of businesses will go out of business. They wouldn't exist. And a lot of young dentists who may be watching this, one thing I'll say is that particularly in the area that we live in with social media and potential flashy lifestyles, I think be humble, look at what your goals are, and ultimately, if your real drive and ambition is potentially to own a practice one day, keep some money aside for a rainy day. Keep some money aside for potentially purchasing your practice. I can't stress that more importantly than it is right now. And I think COVID has really shone lights on that personally.
I think that's perhaps a good sound piece of advice and a nice way to sort of end this today. Next week sees a continuation of this. Now, just to round up, in the comments below, I've put where you can get the CPD for this talk. In the comments below, I've also put something which is a talk by Joe Butt on the business of dentistry, which he delivered at our Dental Business Club perhaps about a year ago or something like that. Absolutely phenomenal talk, worth watching. And finally, Andy Acton has been very, very active, and he's continuing this next week, talking about buying and selling practices, looking at the factors that you take into consideration and everything else. So register for that, and that link will be seen below. I hope that's been very useful. Andy Acton says, spot on, me here. The banks love the NHS, then plan-based, and finally fee per item. Finding the right one is more important than baseline value. I think it's so true because you've just said that, potential. Does it resonate with you as a practice? Does it resonate with you as a business? Do you feel you can be a good leader in creating a culture and building that potential in that business? And I think I love the way you ended that. Be humble and be simple, because you need to play a very, very careful game, keep the money aside, and just build a sound business. Very, very intelligently said. For a young practice owner, I think you're miles ahead of many people who've been doing this for 20, 30 years. Credit to you for that. And I could sense that passion when we first spoke, and I think you've articulated that absolutely brilliantly. Much appreciate your time this evening and inspiring Tubulites into making that plunge into practice ownership. We have been alive today, and I'd like to say thank you so much, Mihir, for spending that time and effort in putting that together.
Thank you very much, Drew. Thanks for having me today. It's been a real pleasure.
And I think you should develop this, because I think your development for sharing knowledge and practice ownership is absolutely brilliant. So keep sharing and keep learning. It never ends. Thank you, guys. This has been Tubules Live. Every Monday, inspiring you. Every Monday evening, giving you the energy to start your week in a positive note. See you next week, Monday, 7:30 p.m. Andy Acton comes to the stage. I love what he's putting on Instagram. I'd love to see what he's going to put on the presentation. Have a great evening, everyone. It's bye from me, and it's bye from me here. This has been Tubules Live. Have a great day. Thank you.